Welcome. My name is Elizabeth. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm really glad you're here because I have another true crime story for you. This story, at its center, is really about family secrets and how dangerous it can be to keep secrets, and how back in the day, so before it was okay to talk about your feelings, when therapy was a dirty word and no one cared how you felt, I've heard so many family stories from, 40, 50 years ago or more that have this detail of we just didn't talk about it, or it just never came up. Now, in some cases, those family secrets were small and they affected very few people, but still those few people have to deal with both the issue and the fact that it was never discussed. Because it was the norm that issues weren't discussed, often parents would take the stance of, we're not going to talk about it, we're just going to ignore it, and it will go away. Now, as a society, we have since learned that when things, especially traumatic things, are not dealt with, they end up festering within us and making things far, far worse. Okay, triggers. This story will cover murder, mutilation of dead bodies, cruelty to an animal, matricide, attempted patricide. And if that sounds like something that you are not in the headspace to listen to right now, please click away and take care of yourself. Please take a nap, take a bath. But if you're anything like me, you'll probably want to stick around for the ride. In 2004, Michelle Lynn Jones was an executive at the Gulf Channel. Her career was going very well. She was living in Orlando, Florida, and her life was good. In September of that year, Hurricane Ivan was threatening to hit the southern coast of Florida. Michelle's Aunt Terry, her mom's sister, and Uncle Charlie, Terry's husband, lived on Big Pine Key. If you take a look at a map, it's actually south of Florida, so it was directly in the path of Ivan. And Michelle was really close with her aunt and her uncle, and so she invited them to come stay while the evacuation orders were in place. Michelle was part of this incredible group of friends, these three women, Debbie, Lisa, and Michelle. They were really, really close. They had keys to each other's homes. They always knew what was going on with each other. They talked almost every day. One of those really great, friend groups. Debbie had been over to Michelle's and spent time with Terry and Charlie on the very last day of the storm. The pair could have gone home the next day, but Charlie would convince Terry after an argument, a big argument, to stay one more night. Michelle, who had planned on having her friends Lisa and Debbie over that night, called them to tell them maybe it's not a good idea for you to come over because the Brandts, that's Charlie and Terry, they're arguing and they've drunk a lot of alcohol, and maybe we should just be best for everyone if they just stayed away. This would be one of Michelle's faithful decisions. And a little advice: when things are awkward and uncomfortable, you actually want your friends around. You don't want to keep them away. You want them around. Sorry, I'm laughing. It's always a nervous laugh because this is very uncomfortable. So Michelle was extremely communicative with her family and friends. She spoke to her parents nearly every day, nearly because if one day went by and they didn't talk, no, alarm bells wouldn't go off. But when it would turn to 2 or 3, then Michelle's mom got a call from Michelle's office saying, we haven't seen her. Do you know what's going on with her? Is she okay? So at this point, Michelle's mom starts making frantic calls. Eventually, she would get a hold of Debbie and would ask her to go over to Michelle's house to check in on her. Remember, they all have keys to each other's places. So that's exactly what Debbie did. She arrived and she saw that both Michelle's car and the Brandt's car were still in the driveway. And so her concerns grew pretty instantly. She knocked, but there was no answer, and it was creepily quiet. That, like, it shouldn't be this quiet if there are actually people here feeling. She tried to use her key to get in, but she couldn't get the key to work properly. Thank God for small favors. She called Lisa to discuss the situation, and Lisa said she would meet Debbie at Michelle's. Debbie started walking around the house to try to see into the house. She walked over to the garage, which had a glass door, not the car door, but the people door for the garage had was a glass door. And when she peeked in, what she saw would completely change her world. There was a body hanging by a noose created by a bedsheet. Debbie called the police, and they would arrive at about the same time as Lisa. When the police arrived, they would use Debbie's key to get into the house successfully. This is the key that didn't work which I think is one of the kindest things the universe could have done for Debbie, because 3 seasoned police officers would enter that house, find the crime scene, and return outside in less than a minute, most of them losing their lunch. The officers who witnessed the crime scene would be scarred for life. Okay, we're going to take a step back here and talk about Charlie Brandt, Michelle's uncle, so Michelle's aunt's husband. Now, who is Charlie Brandt? Charlie, in 1971, happened to be 13 years old. He had an older sister, Angela, who was 15 in 71. He had 2 younger sisters, ages 2 and 3. His mom, Ilsa, was 8 months pregnant with Charlie's new little sibling. And on the evening of January 3rd, 1971, the family had just enjoyed their brand new color TV. Fun. Angela remembers heading off to bed to read until she fell asleep, but she would hear yelling instead. So it turns out that Charlie had entered his parents' bathroom where his father was shaving and his mother was taking a bath, carrying a pistol. Angela would hear her father say, "Charlie, no," and then pops that reminded her of fireworks. Her mom then also yelled that Charlie should stop, but there were more pops. Next thing she knew, Charlie was in her room holding the pistol to her head. She was sure she was dead, but the gun would only click. The bullets had all been spent. Charlie would toss the pistol away and start attacking his sister, trying to choke her. She fought him off as best as she could, and she started saying things like, "Why are you doing this? I love you, Charlie. Charlie, please stop. I love you. Don't do this. Why are you doing this?" Trying to be human, trying to reach the human inside him, because Angela ended up reporting that when she looked into her brother's eyes at that moment, she did not recognize him. She described his eyes as dark, as if someone else was there, as if they were someone else's eyes. Eventually, he broke. She says that she could see the change in his eyes, and he said, "What did I do?" Angela would tell them that she was pretty sure he had just killed their parents. And Charlie would start to beg his sister not to leave him, to stay with him no matter what. And she promises, but she's actually in her head waiting for a safe moment to run. Smart girl. Picture it. She runs out of the house in like a torn and bloody nightgown and goes to the next door neighbor's house. She doesn't knock. She just tries to open the door. I mean, 71, a lot of people left their doors unlocked, but this one happens to be locked. But she's made enough noise that someone in the house is now headed for the front door. But Angela has already run off to the next house. And she's trying to get the attention of these neighbors when Charlie comes out of their house, heads to the same house Angela went to originally. And this time when he knocks, there's someone right there to answer the door. Charlie then says, "I just killed my parents." Okay. Here's what we know that happened. Now, there's conflicting reports on whether Charlie shot his father once or 3 times, but everyone agrees that he was shot. The shots were to his back. Charlie shot his mom either 2 times or 4 times, but everyone agrees they were directly into her belly. Herbert, Charlie's dad, would miraculously survive the tragedy, but Ilsa and her unborn child would not. It was Indiana in 1971. There were no laws on the books on how to deal with a 13-year-old murderer. In fact, 13 was too young to punish according to the laws at the time. He wasn't put on trial. There was no hearing. He wasn't sentenced to anything. Instead, he was placed into a hospital psychiatric unit where he would stay for no more than a year. The mental health professionals would not be able to diagnose Charlie with any mental disorders. What? So when Herbert fought to get Charlie released from the hospital, it worked. He was released and he returned home. Herbert would move his family to Florida to get a fresh start. If anyone asked or it came up, which was extremely rare, the family would say that Herbert's very first wife was killed tragically in a car accident. Herbert would remarry twice, and both of those women would have no knowledge of what happened to Herbert's first wife. In fact, Charlie's two younger sisters had no idea what their brother had done to their mother, an unborn sibling. They'd been in the house when it happened, but they were 2 and 3. So they believed this car accident lie. Once Charlie was back home at the age of 14, Herbert would never discuss with him what happened. He would never ask, hey, why'd you kill your mom? Why'd you try to kill me? Why did you attack your sister? Nothing. They simply did not discuss it. It simply didn't come up. It was completely ignored. Now, it's possible that we know at least part of what the catalyst was for the 1971 event. About a week before Charlie and his father had gone hunting, they brought Charlie's dog with them, a dog that was very frustrating to Herbert because the dog would listen to Charlie, but it would not listen to Herbert. And of course, this was due to the fact that Charlie was communicating appropriately and correctly with the animal, and Herbert was not. But of course, Herbert didn't see it that way. So when the dog ran off into some bushes and he wouldn't come out, Herbert decided that the best thing to do would be to shoot into the bushes. And he killed the dog, Charlie's dog. The dog that Charlie described as his only friend. Now, Charlie wouldn't blame his actions on this event, but I'm wondering if Dad never again brought it up because he was afraid to hear that it was Herbert killing Charlie's dog that caused him to snap. But again, we'll never know. Apparently, Herbert was happy to just assume what he was assuming and not know and live, bliss. Ignorance is bliss, I guess. It's not really, in case you're wondering. In 2004, when Charlie was found hanging by his neck in an obvious unalive event, when the other 2 victims were found, his sister Angela wouldn't be quite as surprised as everyone else. Okay, Angela, Charlie's sister. Angela met Jim when she was in high school, and after they graduated, the 2 were married. Because they were married, Angela would tell Jim exactly what happened to her mom and dad and unborn sibling, and that and that her brother had perpetuated the crime. She told Jim that she was still scared of him, and she would always barricade her door if she ever had to sleep in the same house with him. Do we blame her? No, of course not. I don't blame her anything. I can't believe she let him stay in the same house with her. This is unbelievable. After many years in the same family, Jim and Charlie would grow to become close friends. And they would remain close friends even after Jim and Angela divorced. So one day, when Charlie asked Jim if he could set him up, with one of Jim's friends, Jim did just that. He set up Charlie with his friend Terry, and they really hit it off, like really well. When Charlie started telling Jim about how he felt about Terry and that he thought he wanted to marry her, Jim would ask Charlie very pointedly, very directly, does she know about what happened in 1971 to your mom? Charlie responded, no, and I don't want her to know. That's the past and it's over. But Jim insisted. If Charlie didn't tell her, then Jim was threatening to tell her himself. Later, Jim would ask Charlie if he told her. He said that he did. Jim never checked with Terry to see if she actually knew what was happening. But at one point, Jim did have a conversation with Terry that made him think that she did know. They were talking about whether they were going to have children or not. And she said, considering everything, no, we're not going to have kids. To Jim, that was a confirmation that she knew what Charlie had done. But that is way too vague as far as I'm concerned. Charlie and Terry would end up marrying in a private ceremony where his family was not included. Could it be that Charlie did this to make sure that Terry never found out what he did when he was 13? It's possible. They would spend the next 18 years married in what looked like from the outside a perfect marriage. I mean, it almost looked like a perfect marriage from the inside too. Terry was bubbly and outgoing. Charlie was quiet and reserved, and they seemed to fit together perfectly. One of Terry's friends was quoted to saying, "If my husband loved me even a third of how much Charlie loves Terry, I would be in heaven," which is just depressing in so many ways. They were also known to make each other's lunches because lunch made by the one who loved you tastes better. Now, there's going to be a lot of gross details in this story. That's just the first. Okay, back to 2004 and Michelle's house. What did the police find inside the house? They would go into the house, and first they would find Terry. She's on the living room couch, deceased. She's been stabbed 7 times in the chest. So when the police head upstairs and find Michelle in the bedroom, they expect to see her in somewhat of the same condition as Terry. They were so wrong. With hindsight, they realized that Terry's murder was literally just a way to get to Michelle. Charlie's main concern during this crime was clearly Michelle. Okay, what happened to Michelle? First, Michelle was stabbed in the heart, and this stabbing was the fatal blow, so at least Michelle was absolutely not alive when the following was done to her. Okay, so here's where the really gross and upsetting details of this crime. Michelle's head had been removed and placed on the bed in a way that it made it look like she had to watch what Charlie was doing to her body. Her breast had been removed and placed beside her on the bed. She'd been disemboweled. Her intestines had been thrown into the garbage can. Her organs had been removed and placed around the bed. Her heart had been nearly surgically removed. With when I mean nearly surgically, the precision of it was really impressive. They could tell it wasn't a surgeon, but it was someone who knew what they were doing, to put it in gross terms. So her heart had been surgically removed and placed also near her body. Her left leg had at least partially been removed. I guess he got to the point where he couldn't actually make it all the way through. And Victoria's Secret underwear and bras were cut up and strewn throughout the room. The crime scene was horrifying. Blood and gore was everywhere, and the precision of the cuts to the body chilled the officers to their core. When Charlie's sister Angela arrived at the police station, before they could even ask her a single question, she said, "I have something I have to tell you about my brother." So, crimes committed by people under the age of 18 are expunged. The idea being that you should not be held responsible for the dumb choices you make when you're a kid and your brain isn't fully developed. Crimes like trespassing, vagrancy, underage drinking, vandalism, and the like, being expunged from your record makes sense. But should violent crimes be expunged? In this case, the boy wasn't criminally responsible simply because of his age. But shouldn't the authorities have known that he actually did this? If they had, maybe lives could have been saved. So Angela had to tell the police about what happened in 1971 because, like I said, there was no record of it. The police would have no way of knowing that this actually happened, and therefore they couldn't use the information to try to solve other crimes. It would be 2004 before Charlie and Angela's little sisters found out what actually happened to their mother. They were in their 40s. I have no idea what effect this had on the sisters, but it could not have been easy for them, and my heart goes out to those 2 women. The investigators would head first to Terry and Charlie's house on Big Pine Key. They would find that Charlie, he was an engineer, and he had boarded up the house for the hurricane with this meticulous precision. I keep saying meticulous precision, but that's what he did. All the wood boards fit perfectly within the windowsills and the door frames. The door boards had perfectly cut out holes for the doorknobs. When they got inside the house, they found a poster on the bedroom door, on the backside of the bedroom door. So when Terry and Charlie were inside, they could see it as they slept. This was the kind of poster that you would only ever see in a biology class or maybe a medical student's dorm room. It was a body, a woman's body, half of it showing the muscle structure within the body and the other half showing nerves and bones and sinew, and I'm not medical. What's strange is that the woman had her hair up, she had a hairdo. She's like a messy bun. So weird. So first, when was the last time you had a poster up on your bedroom door? When you were a teen? Yeah. Maybe when you were in college, right? This doesn't make any sense. Second, who has a poster like this when they're not a med student or the like? When the police looked into Charlie's search history, oh, the things they can find with our search histories. The search history would reveal that he looked into necrophilia sites, snuff films, and autopsy photos. They found an extensive collection of Victoria's Secret catalogs addressed to Charlie. Remember what was cut up and all over Michelle's floor? It's going to get grosser, so don't forget that detail. He also had a collection of books on surgery, clippings on autopsies, and posters on the subject, as I mentioned. The investigators would then interview people who knew Charlie. It turned out that at work, Charlie would talk a lot about Michelle, his niece. But he would not call her Michelle. He would call her by the nickname he used behind her back, Victoria's Secret, because that was the brand of underwear she wore. Gross. Why does your uncle know what underwear you wear, and why is he using it as the nickname for you? I mean, So the police would talk to, all the people that Charlie knew. Jim, of course, is way up on the list. He's the one that set up Charlie and Terry. He was a good friend with Charlie. He actually knew what had happened because he'd been married to Charlie's sister. So they talked to Jim, and Jim would report this very interesting piece of information that years earlier, when they were fishing on some sort of fishing trip, Charlie and he were discussing revenge. And Charlie said, "You do know the best way to get revenge, right?" And Jim was like, I guess I'll play along. No, what's the best way to get revenge? And Charlie says, "Oh, well, you gotta cut out someone's heart." Neon flashing red sign flag, anyone? Hello? He said it was strange, but he wrote it off, which I do not get, because he knew of what Charlie had been capable at the age of 13. I would never blow something like that off. That's whatever. Hindsight's 2020 though, so we'll keep that in mind. Terry's family is adamant that she simply could not have known about the incident in 1971. They have a couple of reasons why. The first is that Terry simply could not keep a secret. She was one of those people that if you had information that you wanted to get out, you would tell Terry, tell her it was a secret, and then everyone would know. So like they knew she couldn't keep this kind of secret. Also, they believed with 100% certainty that if she did know, she never would have married him. They placed a great deal of blame on Jim for not making sure that she knew. But as we all know, like I said, hindsight's 2020, and my opinion is that Angela, or her father, could also be blamed for not making sure that Terry knew about Charlie's past. Why does it all land on Jim's shoulders? After collecting evidence about and information about Charlie, the police decided that there was very little chance that a man who did a violent act in 1971 only did his second act in 2004. The precision of the treatment of Michelle's body led the police to think that Charlie had committed other crimes between 1971 and 2004. 26 murders would be looked into as possibly being committed by Charlie. Only 3 have ever been made public as possible. Okay, so they took 23 and they said, no, we're not even going to tell the public that we think that these could have been him. There isn't enough to connect. I'm going to briefly tell you about these 3 people who lost their lives that could possibly be attributed to Charlie. Okay, I'm going to go in chronological order. So in 1978, when Charlie was 21, he was living in Volusia, I think I'm pronouncing that right, County. Now, Carol Sullivan was 12 years old, and she was abducted at her school bus stop in Volusia County on September 20th, 1978. Now, her skull was found in a bucket, leading authorities to assume that she had been decapitated and was murdered, therefore. Charlie could not be tied to the crime in any other way. So he had simply lived in the same area and the victim had been decapitated. That is all that there was to connect, and they still put it on the list of possibles. So the connections of the other 23 must have been really, really small. So 1988, this one I think, the next two I lean really far on the side of that I think Charlie did have something to do with these, but again, we can't be sure. So in 1988, Lisa Saunders, who was 20 years old, she went to a party on No Name Key, and when she wanted to head home, none of her friends were ready to leave, so she headed off alone. Don't let your friends go home alone, if possible. Also, this was 1988, so we've learned a lot more since then, but if someone wants to leave by themselves, you put them in an Uber, you put them in a cab, you make sure that they're going to get home safe. You don't just let them wander off. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Okay, so when she headed off alone, that was the last time that her friends would ever see her. In December of 88, Lisa was beaten, stabbed, and dragged from a vehicle. One morning, two fishermen thought they had caught a massive garbage on their lines, only to pull it in and find that it was actually a human body. And it was Lisa. Her heart was missing when she was found, but it is unclear if it was extracted by an attacker or eaten by vultures. Terry kept a sort of journal. Now, this is important. Terry, Charlie's wife, kept a, don't think of journal like long entries. Dear diary, this is how I'm feeling. Think of it as just like jotting down little things. Like one day would say dinner with Charlie, or Charlie got home late, or Charlie went fishing, or enjoyed the sun, stuff like that. Well, on this day, the day that Lisa was killed, Terry wrote in her journal, "Weird day." Jim remembers getting a call from Terry that day. She was distraught and was not sure if she should call the police on Charlie or not. She had gone into the garage and found Charlie covered in blood. When she asked him what he was doing, he said, I went fishing and now I'm filleting them. Like I'm gutting and cleaning the fish. But one, there was no fish that Terry could see, and two, fish don't have that much blood in them. Okay? She called Jim to see what he thought, and he told her that it must have just been fish blood and not to worry. And this is so strange to me because he knew what Charlie had done at 13. I don't get it. So with the weird day and him covered in blood and her heart being removed, it's possible. Okay. The next one is 1995, Darlene Toller. She was 38. And she was a sex worker in Miami. She was found dumped in a grassy area near a highway, wrapped in a blanket and then wrapped in a tarp, kind of like a package. Darlene was missing her head and her heart. So remember how I said he was precise and meticulous? He would keep a very detailed log of his mileage. He did a lot of traveling. So Charlie used the same highway regularly, and his log showed on that day an extra 100 miles, roughly the driving distance between Big Pine Key and the area of Miami where Toller's body was found. Also, the dog hair found on Darlene matched the dog hairs found in the trunk of Charlie's car. Charlie and Terry did not own a dog. So no killings would be definitively attributed to Charlie Brandt, but these three are suspected to be possibly his. The authorities believe that he must be a serial killer. There's no way it went from 1971 to 2004 and he had such precision in committing this crime. So as I see it, the problem boils down to the keeping of this secret. If Terry had known, she might not have married Charlie, saving both her niece and herself. If police had known, maybe they could have connected Charlie to one of the other murders he committed and stopped him before he committed more violent crimes. Terry's family has been pushing for this creation of a law called Terry's Law, where violent crimes would not be expunged from records no matter the age of the perpetrator. Now, while this federal law has not passed, many states have enacted laws of this kind. In fact, if this crime happened where I live today, the crime would remain on the perpetrator's record regardless of the age of when the crime was committed. Hopefully, laws like this will help to save lives. Secrets aren't healthy for humans. And when trauma isn't dealt with, it just gets worse. Most often, it's the issues we try to ignore that come back and cause us the most grief in the long run. And when it comes to violent crimes, The police should know exactly who did what and when and how, and not be kept in the dark about anyone who has perpetrated violence, no matter what their age is. Again, thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Thank you for listening to my story today. If you're still here, oh my gosh, thank you so much. Maybe subscribe or hit the thumbs up button for me. It's really helpful. So I have full show notes below. Do me a favor. Be nice to each other out there and be nice to yourself. It's really important to be nice to yourself. I'll catch you next time. Bye.